Hello, this video introduces the structure of the Open DID GitHub repository. This is an appendix session, so feel free to follow along. Now, let's get started with the session. First, an overview of the GitHub repository structure will be provided. The Open DID GitHub repository is broadly composed of three parts. These are server, mobile, and document. First, the server is divided into application and SDK. The application is the part that actually provides the service. And the SDK is a collection of libraries that handle common functions or core logic. In most cases, the application is implemented by referencing this SDK for its core logic. Next, mobile is also divided into application and SDK. Here too, the application is in charge of the actual service. And the SDK acts as a library responsible for common or core functions. Finally, the document section consists of two parts. Document architecture is a space where documents that help understand the overall structure of Open DID are gathered. And release notes is an area where release contents and history for each version are organized. For your information, each repository is internally composed of a source project and documents. The source project consists of development source code, which is the actual code for Open DID to operate. The documents include design documents and guides for the entire project. From now on, let's briefly look at each one. First, as a common part, the naming convention of the repository will be briefly explained. A prefix is attached to the front, followed by the module name, then the project type, and finally the platform. The delimiter for each is a dash. If you look at each repository with this naming in mind, it will be much easier to understand. First, the server repository will be explained. As mentioned earlier, the server is divided into application and SDK. Inside the server application, as seen on the screen, there are application repositories that are in charge of actual services such as TAS, issuer, and verifier. All application services that run on the server side are included in this area. In addition, there is a demo server where one can check how Open DID actually works in a demo form. And there is also an orchestrator server that helps with integrated installation and monitoring of the entire Open DID configuration environment. Next is the SDK. The SDK is a collection of libraries in which the core logic commonly used in applications is concentrated. For example, it includes repositories such as the Blockchain SDK, which is in charge of communication with the blockchain, the Wallet SDK for linking with the wallet, and the Core SDK, which contains major functions such as VC and VP. Next is mobile. Mobile is also divided into application and SDK. First, inside the application, there are the Android authorized app, the iPhone authorized app, and a demo app that allows one to experience the app in a demo form on the web. And inside the SDK, there are the Client SDK for Android, the Client SDK for iPhone, and the SDK for Android written in Kotlin. One additional point to explain here is that in the case of the mobile SDK, the repositories are divided by platform or language, but not by function. In other words, it can be thought of as a form in which various functions are concentrated in one repository. Next is document. Internally, document has a DID document architecture and a DID release repository. DID document architecture is a repository of various documents that help one understand the overall architecture of Open DID. And DID release is a repository that manages the release shape and history for each version in one place. Finally, the session will conclude by showing the entire configuration at a glance. As can be seen, the repository is composed of a total of 5 categories, and each category is as shown on the screen. Server application, server SDK, mobile SDK, mobile application, and document. For more details on each repository, please visit the OmniOne Open DID GitHub and experience it for yourself. For more detailed information about each repository, please visit the OmniOne Open DID GitHub directly and explore it yourself. You can scan the QR code on the screen to be taken to the GitHub page. And that concludes the Appendix session. Hopefully, this session has helped in understanding the Open DID GitHub repository. Thank you for listening.